all Saturday. It's gorgeous here in Southwest Colorado. It's just golden outside. I'm looking out my window, and the everything has a little tint of gold to it, and it is a beautiful time of year. One of my favorite. So yeah, so happy birthday to all the cross stitchers and shop owners, and my gosh, I couldn't even keep track of how many people I was listening to or saw on Instagram, and it's like it's my birthday month, or it's their birthday month, and I'm like, wow, it's my birthday month too. We usually take a fall drive for my birthday, and we went up to Telluride, and it's a box canyon. So you one way in, one way out. You're boxed in. I mean, you can get over Black Bear and a couple other four-wheel drive roads if you know what you're doing. But right now it's just gorgeous, and I think I have some footage here of going up and over, or coming down, I think, into Telluride from the Mountain Village, which is when we were driving out, there was an elk herd that only had one bull, and probably, I mean, what is there, like 10, 12, 15 cows. It's kind of the end of rut. There's beaver that you'll sometimes see, or you see the results of damming up the creek that comes through there, the elk, the deer. And it's pretty cool that they've saved that valley floor. But yeah, so I probably put that footage in here. And then driving home, we also went through a section where you can see Wilson Peak. We named dog, well, one of our kids named their dog Wilson, but it's a pretty famous mountain in Colorado. It is the mountain on the Coors can, the Coors beer can, even though Coors is brewed in Golden, Colorado, which is on the east side, the Front Range, and everybody kind of thinks that's Colorado. They forget that there's a lot more Colorado, but actually the Wilson Peak is from our little southwestern corner of the state. So yeah, so I had a good birthday, and I had some treats for my birthday, which were fun. Mainly I finally got my hair cut, which, man, a good haircut just makes you feel so much better. I know it's my own fault. Last time I went in, she asked me if I wanted it textured, and it still was looking pretty good. And I said, no, I think it's okay. Just kind of give it a trim. Well, like a week later, all the heaviness all around came back in. So I'm happy to have a large amount of my hair textured out. And then I got someone, I don't think it was connected to FlossTube. I think it was on Instagram, or if I'm wrong, but Target has flannel shirts that are like, oversized. But the exciting thing, they have pockets. They have pockets. A flannel shirt that has a pocket, 2 pockets on each, well, 3 pockets, because there's one here. Oh my gosh, when I saw that, I got on the Target website and treated myself to 2. I got this one, and then a kind of really bold red plaid one to wear, so have a variety, and not just my hoodies. But yeah, I think I like it. So I treated myself to that, and my husband came home on my birthday. My actual birthday was Monday, with a wooden puzzle. It's like a steampunk, like a steampunk Zephyr balloon puzzle that has, the pieces are like this big, and they're wooden, and we tried to put some of it together, and we were breaking pieces. And so I've been working on it all week, little Elmer's glue here or there to fix it, and he's walked by the table and been like, wow, if I had known that this kind of thing would keep you entertained this long, I would have done this sooner for your birthday. While I'm thinking of it, And since I mentioned other people having birthdays on FlossTube, so this year, I mean, we're October, so we're 10 months in, how enjoyable and what a pleasure it has been to follow these other floss tubers. Because like I said, when I was like, oh, I could take my applique, there's my rabbit, and turn my designs into cross stitch. And then I was like, okay, you haven't actually cross stitched in 30 years. You might want to actually cross stitch some before you are trying to, sell your designs. So to sit on the couch and get to stitch, and then while I'm having that happen, to be listening to these floss tubers. It is so wonderful. And I want to highlight a few, every week. But I think I said that Teresa Kogut was who I saw first and was like, oh, okay. That's an interesting name for her own channel. And gee, she's an artist. And gosh, I really want to have the time and energy to be in a place where I can also do it like an artist channel. So Teresa Kogut, and I really enjoy her. She kind of has two channels. One is specifically about kind of the floss tube structure and her plans. And then the other one, I want to say is on Wednesdays, and it's like more of a, she actually does other kinds of art. She'll do some watercolor painting, design, illustration painting, and kind of you can watch her work, and she'll talk, and that's been really enjoyable. The Fable Stitchers, I just got done watching their episode that they just, the one after the spider, which, oh, the sense of humor. I just love the sense of humor. I love, obviously, Steph and Pamela. What is their channel called? Comes on Monday. Well, I think they post it on Sundays, but I start my week with it. And they're like, my Monday doesn't seem right. Like this last Monday, I was like, well, why do I feel off? And it's like, oh yeah, I haven't actually seen their. I'll put the names on the screen because I can't off the top of my head remember the details. But I enjoy them. The Evertote videos, and then also the Off the Grid videos that Caroline and Carrie do together. I really enjoy the Sunshine Stitchers down in Florida, Celia and EJ. Getting that right? They are hilarious. They will just come up with something like a discussion of Santa Claus. If Santa Claus is an elf or not. And you just want to jump in it. And you're like talking to your TV, and then you're like, oh yeah, they can't hear it. But I do have to say this as an art historian and as an artist to answer your confusion or your pondering about Santa Claus. Santa Claus has morphed through the ages. So the Clemens poem, that, to my wondering eyes did appear, but tiny sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, da 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 da. Yes, he was in that poem. It talks about him being elfish, and then you have the morphing of Santas from all the immigrants that came over from Europe, be it Ireland, England, Germany. You had different ideas. And what's kind of interesting about America, true with Halloween, Christmas, is sometimes we hold on to our immigrant traditions stronger and keep them a little bit more pure or warp them different than Europe. And so that changes. But then the Santa Claus that we probably first think of when someone says Santa Claus, the big guy, is specifically because of Coca-Cola. So a Macy's parade and Coca-Cola. So when Coca-Cola started doing their campaigning around Santa and Christmas, he changed how he looked. And then when Macy's parade, that was utterly 100% specific to extending the buying season of Christmas, Santa Claus cease being an elf-like jolly old whatever the phrase is. So, and the other thing about Christmas and Santa Claus and Rudolph is reindeer males lose their antlers after their rut, after in the fall. So any reindeer that still has antlers is actually a girl. So the 8 reindeer are all girls. Rudolph, well, I don't know. He just has a little, you know, but yeah, only female reindeers keep their antlers through the winter, and then they drop them in the spring. So, but yeah, I really enjoy them. Obviously, I've mentioned the Justine and Shelley from Welcome Stitchery. I mean, they're a hoot and a half. You know, I laugh so hard with their videos, and the Sunshine Stitcher videos always have. And then their whole thing they did with Boo Boo Bear and all the different bears in cartoons, and the ones that wore pants and didn't wear pants, and oh my gosh, it was so funny. I just wanted to highlight other floss tubers that I've thoroughly enjoyed, and I thoroughly messed up their names, and I know their names, and when I get off of here, I'll remember their names. So I will definitely link all the ones I just mentioned so you can follow them. But yeah, there's some really fun, very entertaining floss tubes. More than I've named. I just named a few off the top of my head. But on that, I did make an art purchase, not cross stitch. We went down to Santa Fe. Whenever we go down to Santa Fe, obviously I walk around galleries. And one look that I really love, and I'm starting now to, like I said, purchase other people's artwork, is smaller landscapes with gorgeous big gold frames, like that combination of like a very westerny landscape in a very ornate frame. And I have a log house, and so that up against log, I've always thought, oh, that looks really pretty. But I mean, obviously, you go into Santa Fe, you're talking upwards of $1,000, you know, for something, you know, that big framed. So, you know, that just hasn't happened. And I was walking, but then also for my birthday, I usually, you know, my husband and I have kind of fallen into, for my birthdays, Mother's Day, Christmas, we'll purchase art. You know, sometimes I'll just say, you know, for my birthday, I want a little fun that I can purchase some artwork. And he, you know, he loves it because he doesn't have to, you know, but he did get me my my steampunk Zephyr puzzle. So he did good this year. But I'm sorry, I'm appreciating my haircut so much. So we weren't really anywhere where I could really look for art the last week or two. So it's been kind of in the back of my head. And I was walking my dog in one of the little towns around here that still having the farmers market. You know, it's still going on Wednesdays. And I'm walking by this booth that I see, you know, I think it was acrylic painting, and that was an oil. I think she does acrylic. And it just caught my eye, and I was like, you know, that's pretty good. You know, sometimes you walk by or you know people and you kind of like, well, that's, you know, I mean, again, art is wonderful for art. It doesn't mean I want to buy it. You know, there's kind of a jump from the art you create for the enjoyment of art and the art you make that is going to stay in your family and it's just for the joy of art making. I mean, I can go on and on about the joy of art making, but then there is a little gap to the art I want to purchase and buy and invest in. But she was interesting enough that I, you know, with my big dog, came over to her booth and I started looking around, and what drove me to her was I mentioned that Mesa Verde is right outside our window. The outline of Mesa Verde was exactly like you were standing on my porch. And so I was just like, where are you? And so she described where she lived, and this is canyon country, so there's like, there's just like a wide, canyons. So you kind of have to drive around to get to the other side of canyons here. Um, and she was like 2 canyons over. And so I looked at her work, and she was not pricing it very high. Like I felt bad. I she needed to price it better. I even kind of negotiated up a little bit and gave her a little bit more than what she was asking, because I'm like, I can't buy. I mean, sweet lady. I mean, a ranch wife probably. I haven't really seen her before in the area. We traded cards and stuff now. Uh, but yeah, so I made art purchases. So this is the one, and like I said, they're little. They're, like in Santa Fe, you would have this size, and then I'm going to find a ornate frame to put around it. But this is the one that I really was drawn to, because that's the view of Mesa Verde out my window. And this little cow, I mean, that's what I see driving around to get down into a town or wherever I'm going. But what you got to understand is that, like, in between here are deep canyons. Like, that tree probably is going down into the start of a canyon. So, but that, with an ornate frame around it on one of our log walls. So I saw this one, and her name's Shirley. I don't know how much she wants to get advertised online. She was, as I dropped, she was very much of just a pleasure painter. She was an older lady, so I don't want to, like, throw out her privacy if she, but yeah. So now I have a new art friend that I know of that's just down across the canyon from me. So that's the first one I saw that I knew I wanted. And then there were 2 or 3 other ones that kind of would go well side by side. I think like up and down maybe. So then I finally settled on this one. And that is such a typical, and that is, again, slightly different angle of Mesa Verde. I love how she does her birds in the sky. But yeah, but that's like the roads around here. That's what you see. I mean, those are the colors of Southwest Colorado. So yeah, so I got 2 paintings, art acquisitions that I'm going to get online here. They're both 8x10s, so I'm going to get online here. I'm probably going to spend 4 times as much on the frames as I did on the artwork. But that's so exciting, because the last time I was in Santa Fe, I was looking at just this kind of idea. And the landscapes around Santa Fe are obviously more New Mexican landscapes, which are beautiful. But to get this, and the title of this one is Beauties, which I just think those cows. I mean, look at that. Look at the cows. She's really good. She just had, I mean, and the clouds have such movement in them. I mean, I was really impressed. So I might have to move some things around, because I think these would be really fun on the wood, outside wood logs. So that was a treat. That was a birthday treat to me. So if you saw the title of this floss tube, October is a lot of things, but one thing it is that I don't think is highlighted very much is it is Dyslexic Awareness Month. And I think I mentioned in the last 2 videos how I have dyslexia. And I had a question here about fall. When did fall turn into autumn? You know how hard it is for me to spell autumn? It's like vacuum. I never get it right, ever. And then the new one that people are saying that I'm just like, yeah, I'll stick with fallish. It's really fallish outside, or I'm going to get some decor because it's fallish. The new one is autismal. Autismal. I can't even say it. When did we start saying autismal? I mean, the first time I heard that, and I think it was like on another, I think it was on a AuthorTube channel that I follow, a writer that kind of does a weekly check-in, and she was talking about getting, leaves and changing out her candles and using the word optimal. Like, that is just too much for me. That is too much for me. I'm sure some people are saying you have dyslexia. You do not act like you have dyslexia. But so October is Dyslexia Awareness Month, and so I thought October I'm going to try and highlight my own dyslexia journey, and then also as an educator, how dealing with neurodivergent things. I have dyslexia in my family generationally, like just listening to my grandma talk about her brothers, or my mother's generation, and now my generation, and then my daughter's generation. I could pick out the dyslexic gene. But I was born, the third kid in 3 years. Like literally, my sister and I are 3 years apart, and I have a brother in between. I also was born the 9th girl in my extended family of cousins, and the first girl after my brother was born, and he was the only boy. 1 boy, 9 girls in this cousin group. And then a huge factor also was months before he was born, my uncle was killed in Vietnam. And so when he was born, it was a huge deal in my family, to have a boy born after losing an uncle. No, it was not exciting when I was born. There were already 7 or 8 girls. I forget exactly, how you count it, which way in the family. But so nothing exciting. And then my parents got divorced when I was 4. So there was a lot going on in my very, very young childhood where, for whatever reason, not much attention was paid to me directly. But so then I started school. My mother divorced my dad, moved from actually Aspen, Colorado, where my dad worked in the Forest Service, to Northern Colorado to stay with her parents, who had a cabin up near Estes Park. And my siblings were old enough to go to school. I wasn't. I was an October birthday, so I had to wait a whole nother year before I got into the school system. So I spent a lot of time with my grandmother. I mean, I feel like my grandmother raised me as much as my mom raised me. And then 4 months, 6 months after that, my grandfather died. So a lot of upheaval before I was even in school. Parents got divorced, uncle killed in Vietnam. My grandfather, who would probably have been a male influence, died. And then being another girl after the boy, the boy came. And that was a big deal in my family. The boys, because there were so few of them for multiple generations, there have been way less boys than girls. Right or wrong, that has been a factor, my family. So I get into school, and already kind of was artsy. And I can remember the drinking fountain at Lincoln Elementary that we were standing at during conferences when my mom told me that I would be going to special class. It was literally called special class, special ed, for part of the day to help me. I just knew that there was stuff I just wasn't getting in class. I found artwork and letters from that age, and I wrote every letter backwards. The only word I couldn't spell backwards was mom. M-O-M. You can't write it backwards. Other than that, I wrote everything backwards. Like in a mirror, I opened, if we were making a card in class or something, my cards go the wrong direction. I wore my shoes on the wrong feet. I put my shirts on backwards. I couldn't tell my right from my left. I was extremely awkward, extremely clumsy. Kind of was unkept. My mom was a single mom, working mom, and so I kind of had to get myself ready in the morning. And just I was that kid that, as a teacher, I've had those kids where I say a little special prayer to Jesus telling me to not let that kid think I treat them any different than another kid in class. It takes a little extra effort to to treat them normally or the way they should be treated. I had teachers who did get me and encouraged me. I had more teachers who didn't get me and were dismissive, just kind of ignored me and just, oh, yeah, you're over there. And I had a few teachers that were outright hostile towards me. One grade, I remember, and she was young. I get it now. She was a young new teacher. She wasn't a very good teacher. She didn't last very long as a teacher, but she was so hostile towards me. We had co-teaching. Two teachers shared a grade, and then they would trade back and forth for different things. The other teacher that technically wasn't my teacher, at I think it was 4th grade, I could tell she was protecting me. That she actually was doing things to protect me from this other teacher. I was in the bottom reading, we had those SRA cards that were like color coded, and what a stupid thing to do. You're in brown. My best friend was in fuchsia pink. That labeled me. I'm the kid who can't get out of brown. If you're good, if you can read, you can be fuchsia pink. Why don't you make the bottom fuchsia pink? And then the top brown? Like congratulations, you've gained a color. And I just remember, obviously, even to this day, it just makes me go, just to cringe. I was a brown kid. But I went to the special ed. They tested. They don't know what they were testing. They called it just inability to read. I did the little tests, like the ones that I've seen, done now as a teacher. And at that time, they were convinced it was an inner ear balance issue. So I would walk on a balance beam. I'd go to the special ed class, and I'd have to walk back and forth on a balance beam. When my niece, who also I'm pretty sure has dyslexia, she was dealing with it, they had then transferred to this era thinking it was an eye issue. So she had to do eye exercises. Every evening she had to somehow track, I forget these eye exercises that she had to do. I had people being helpful who would write, I had a big, I gotta look at my rings on this hand, an L and an R in Sharpie. And I was tested, like I would put my hand, okay, show me your left, show me your right, show me your left. And and eventually I would literally, I had no idea what was right. I still don't. If you took my ring off and I couldn't see where the indentation of my ring anymore, and you swirled me around in a circle, I could not tell you right from left. The only way I could tell you is just to stop thinking and reach for a pen, and I'm left-handed. No, that's my right hand. And then see if I could draw something to test which hand was right, which hand was left. But what would really frustrate people is sitting down in the chair, getting drilled. I would take my fingernail and press it really hard into my thumb where it like hurt. And remember, that was right. The hand that hurt was right. So when my hands are behind my back, I could feel the pain in one hand and know that that was right. And then I could prove that I knew my right from my left. And then what would get these people so mad is I would get up, we would go do something else, and they were like, well, I now have taught this, this pathetic child right from left. And then I would know, and the frustration of some of these, either helpful people or my teachers who didn't understand how I could kind of get something and then it would just go away. The frustration that I sensed from them was huge. But like I said, I had some teachers that were fantastic. I had some teachers who gave me a clean slate every single year or every single semester or every single week. And they just knew that I just needed a clean slate and not carry that shame and burden, of my past, who just very gently would tell me in the morning, sweetie, you need to turn your shirt around, or, no, that shoe goes on that foot, and not roll their eyes and huff and, unfortunately, they were not the majority. So I went to special class and had a amazing special ed teacher that I don't even remember her name, and I wish I could give credit where credit is due, because she was so creative and clever. She made me make bulletin boards. I thought she was lazy. At the time, I thought I was being taken advantage of, because she knew I was an artsy kid. So she was like, oh, well, gee, you're in here for 2 hours. Why don't you help me make a bulletin board? And I'm like, oh, I'll help you. Like, I'm getting out of class to help you. And I designed seasonally these bulletin boards. And I drew the artwork for them. Sometimes I copied something, with the overhead projector thing, and I color them in, and I cut out those shapes. And then they always had really long phrases on them. And I would cut out bubble letters. You remember bubble letters? And she would write out whatever the phrase was, and I'd look at it, and I would turn all those letters into bubble letters, and I would cut the bubble letters out. And then I would look at that phrase she wrote out, and I'd staple it onto the board. And then so for like 2 hours, again, with no condemnation, none, she would just come over and look at it, and then she would take off certain letters and put them back down on the table, show me the direction they went, looking at them with her example, and then I would try again. And I honestly think that that's how I finally, in my head, started turning my letters the right direction. It was just by making bulletin boards for the special ed teacher. Sometimes I would make them in the hall. I thought I was the school-appointed bulletin board maker. But in the process of making bulletin boards, I learned how to write my letters the right direction. So that was huge. And then about fifth and sixth grade, I just happened to get really good teachers. And I started to be able to read okay. I couldn't read out loud. Like, nobody could handle listening me to read out loud, because I would get stuck on the little words like of, the, and they would stop me and make me get it perfect before I went on. And now I've learned, don't do that. You just say those words. If they keep stumbling on something and you're having a kid read a sentence, you don't stop them and correct them. You put in, if give them like 5, I forget, like 3 seconds or something. And if they can't get it, you say that word for them. And you want them to feel that rhythm and cadence of reading. A whole nother whole nother video. But so I started to hold my own, I guess is what I'd say. And my 6th grade teacher was a really good teacher, and really challenged me. Now, backtracking, the thing that saved me, like I said, I had a few good teachers. I usually every year had some teacher. Sometimes, like I said, it could have been the music teacher that year. It could have been the librarian that, I had enough teachers that treated me decent, even if my actual teacher had dismissed me. The thing that saved me was art class. Walking in weekly to a class that I was not the dumbest person in the room saved me. In fact, I was one of the best people in the room. I remember Valentine's Day having a contest of cutting out a heart, and having, and it being like rooting someone on, go, yeah. And everyone in the class knew that I would do well. Like, oh yeah. And I'm like, wow, these kids know I'm a good artist. And it was my reprieve. I mean, it was the I just saw some research recently that talks about, neurodivergent brain, that they're able to scan now and really see the activity that happens in the brain when you are dealing with different, ADHD or autistic or dyslexic or whatever. And that they're literally realizing now that struggling that your brain is doing when you are neurodivergent and trying to figure something out does actually create physical pain. And I would tell people this. I was like, my brain hurts, and you'll figure it out. And that's how a lot of my childhood was just trying to figure something out. And then I would eventually figure it out. And that would be this indication to other people, like with like the right and the left. Oh, well, she got it, and they just didn't get it. But so art saved me 100% in elementary school. It saved me in junior high. I was doing well enough in junior high that instead of being labeled slow and stupid, I now was being labeled lazy, because I would have more profound thoughts that didn't match up with my ability for grammar and writing. This was all pre-word processing. This was like handwritten out. And my spelling was horrible. My grammar was horrible. I didn't see things, but I would have kind of deep, profound thoughts. And I remember in my civics class, my U.S. history class, my teacher calling me over and saying, "Is your mom coming for conferences?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, good, because I want to talk to her about your lazy grammar." And it was almost like, again, that dismissiveness happened because the expectation of where they thought I should be wasn't matched up with my writing and my, my producing out of what they thought I could, what I had in my head. I remember, in one, we were writing essays, I think, for the Civil War, and I had spent, I was left alone a lot as a kid, being the last kid with a single mom, in this big family. I just spent a lot of time alone for whatever reason. And I would wander my house or my grandma's house and look at captions, picture captions. So like those Time Life books, on world history or U.S. history, National Geographic, Life magazine. I just read the pictures and the captions because that's what I could handle. I could get enough of a context with the picture that I could then kind of understand what the caption was saying. And those big, long, just white, entire word pages, like in National Geographic, still pretty much freaked me out. That was too many words. Um, but then when about junior high, I started to kind of be curious and read more just for my own interest at home. And I was really interested in the Civil War. And I had read something about Fort Pillow massacre in the Civil War. It happened in Mississippi. Was Mississippi, Memphis, around Memphis? And and it was like, the Union Army surrendered and the Confederate Army came in and just massacred everyone in this fort. And I included it in some essay for my U.S. history class. And the teacher was like, "How do you know about Fort Pillow?" And I said, "Oh, I think," he said, "we didn't talk about it in class. How do you know about it?" And I said, "Oh, well, I read something about it." And it just confused him terribly that I would know about Fort Pillow, but I couldn't spell. So, he wanted to talk to my mom about being, and I remember him using the word lazy. And then, but I had my art classes. And then by that time, I also was in choir and music and theater, all those things that I did not have to have coordination, like sports, because I still do not have coordination at all. To the point I have frustrated PE teachers to the point they've made me sit down because we were doing something that I physically cannot get. When you have a neurodivergent issue, a lot of times your eye, hand, and foot aren't aligned. And like I used to teach preschool, and that was one thing we would test preschoolers on, if their dominance, their eye dominance, their hand dominance, and their foot dominance should be on the same side of their body, and mine zigzags, which is pretty typical for anyone with a autistic or dyslexic or ADHD or whatever. Um, so, uh, so yeah, I had art, theater, and music in junior high, and then I had art, theater, and music in high school. And about that time in high school, my reading level was at a level that then I went back and I remember I was a ferocious reader. I read all of the Anne Green Gable books, all of them, and they are text heavy. I had the Laura Ingalls Wilder's book read to me, and I read them all again myself. Um, through that time, and wasn't the top kid in the art class. I actually spent more time in theater. I actually did a lot of art assistant directing, assistant directing, stage managing in both musicals and theater, drama plays. Um, in high school, I was probably a B average student. I mean, in certain classes, I was getting A's, that were more creative classes. Math, horrible, barely, scraped by math. PE classes, barely scraped by. Sciences, barely scraped by. But the stigma was already there, both in my family and in, I was the youngest of 3 kids going through the school system. So the stigma was kind of there in my church. The interesting thing is to go on to college, at my time you took your ACT. And I bet you can hear that Zoom. My husband's making a mailbox, and I really don't want to stop. So I'm going to keep going. So I apologize for the revving. But so I took my ACT. And as it was a big school, I had I think 300 graduating class, one counselor. So I didn't really need, I really wasn't hugely dependent on my ACTs. I mean, Fort Lewis is a little, Colorado school. It's not like hard to get into. But I went for my little description for my ACTs. And I sat down, and this counselor was dumbfounded. His eyes were all bugged out. And he opened up the graph that kind of showed, how well I did in all these different categories, versus everybody else in the state. And I found the paper the other day, and it still has his like pencil mark of him like tapping it, trying to get me to understand. And he was like, you're in the 90th percentile. And I remember I was just like, oh crap. 90% of everyone my age is above me. And I thought that's what he meant. Like I was just like, am I gonna get into Fort Lewis? You know, if I'm in the 90th percentile. And he finds, so my dyslexia was like, you're I flip flopped the whole thing, and he was tapping with his pencil, and he was circling it. And he showed me he's like, no, and he just looked at me and he said, "You are smarter than 90% of the seniors in the state of Colorado this year. You are smarter than 90% of the seniors in Colorado this year." Well, that was not my education experience. Might be true, but that was not my educational experience. And I think if you took that back to 90% of my teachers, they would not have believed it. But what's interesting is that is actually very, very typical of people with dyslexia. People look at us like we're slow, we're stupid, we don't got it. And in reality, usually people with dyslexia and autism, not on the spectrum, are highly intelligent, creative, problem-solving geniuses sometimes. I just saw a video of a kiddo, a boy who is nonverbal. He has autism and he's nonverbal. And his father figured out a way using a iPad to get a form of communication that the boy could do. For whatever reason, his brain couldn't do it verbally. And he has written a symphony, and it has been performed, and it is gorgeous. And he can't talk. There was another example of a girl who I saw a couple years ago who wrote out this gobbledygook on this piece of paper, illegible, like backwards, squirrely words. I mean, literally made no sense whatsoever. And then she was given a word processor, and she typed in what she was trying to say in a word processor, and it was this profound poem. There's examples and examples and examples of that. Robert Redford's grandson has dyslexia. It runs in their family. And his son, who I think sadly passed away a little while ago, was a film director, producer, and they produced a very cool little short movie on what is dyslexia and how many people in the world in different fields have it. Huge insurgents. It just boggles your mind. Politicians, they think Einstein had it. But that's a great little movie, and I will put that in the description. But so I just sat there after, the Loveland High school system did not recognize me as a gifted and talented student. Let's just put it that way. I was never invited. To any gift. There was some gifted and talented, not a lot at that point, but it was just kind of starting. Yeah. It was news to him, news to me, and news to about every single teacher I had, that I literally had an ACT score that put me in the 90th percentile of every category. Every category. Science, math, reading. I forget how it's all divided up. I think a few of them I dropped down to like high 80s, but then other ones I was like, up a little bit in the 90 percentile. So it averaged at 90%. And, I took it home and showed my mom, and my family, let's just say nothing really changed. Now the weird thing, because labels, I guess this is the point I want to make. Labels are like sticky glue. Don't label your kids. Don't label them. Give them a clean slate and don't label them. Even when, what was really hilarious is, like I said, I knew I wanted to go to Fort Lewis. I didn't apply anywhere else. I wasn't interested in going anywhere else. I just loved the idea of being in Durango. So I started getting phone calls from the department heads. The science, this is a funny one. The science department head of Fort Lewis called me personally to invite me to enroll in their program at Fort Lewis. And I was like, you don't want me in your program. I am so bad at science. I am so bad. I think it was, what was so funny is I think it was, my reading comprehension was my strong point. So I remember, like, I had to read a science article. Like, it was a science article. Oh, yeah, it was science. But you had to read this article, and then you had to answer questions about this article. So for me, it was like, well, that's really more like reading comprehension than it's science. And I told him, I said, thank you very much, but you really don't want me in your science program because I am really bad at science. But on their own, like, I didn't even apply for it. On their own, Fort Lewis put me in what they call their honors program. And that was cool. So in college, I had I was going for an art degree, but there was about 30 of us that filled our general requirements in a smaller specific class for this honors program. So it was very intimate. It was very small. It was a little bit more high end. The professors were really into it, and that's how. And I went through the honors program in college. So I went from being a brown card reading SAR, reading student who put my shoes on backwards, wore my shirt backwards, couldn't keep my face clean, awkward as anything, where teachers like rolled their eyes when they didn't think I could see, to being in an honors program in college. And I'm really not saying this to brag. I'm saying this because I have met and worked with so many kids who were labeled very, very young, and I could see the spark in their eye, and I could tell that they had so much more to offer, and that their capableness of their brain and what they could understand and see was so, the potential was so there and not being filled. And it is like the most disheartening thing for me as a teacher to see that. I've had some kids that, those words like, how sharp are the toolbox? And that's fine. They're God's creatures, they're God's children too, and they should be loved and celebrated, and that they find joy in their life. I mean, I'm not knocking any of them. Little bright-eyed kiddos looking up at you, all of them should have every chance in the world. But I just know what it felt like to be dismissed, and how horrid it is to be dismissed, and how horrid it is to know that someone thinks that you're dumber than a post, but you're not. And then I think it all comes into self-esteem. And I mean, and then I've worked with adults who highly intelligent people who have been greatly limited because they had dyslexia or are on the autistic spectrum or whatever it is. And for whatever circumstances, they haven't had the opportunity to figure it out. And it is so much you having the space and the time to figure it out. Whether it's in the big picture or it's like figuring out how to put a gas card in a gas pump machine, which to this day, looking at that picture, some days I do better than other days. Sometimes I just hand my card to my kid and be like, yeah, you do it, because I can't get it today. The new tap ones, oh my gosh, I can't figure out the tap. I cannot figure out which, I just can't. I just hand the card to somebody else to do it because that's too much directional stuff for me. But I actually figured out I was dyslexic. We didn't even use the word when I was a kid. It was just a learning issue. But I actually figured out dyslexia when I went to college and I shared how I wanted to do art and probably go into art teaching. And and then I saw that art therapy notice on the bulletin board and took educational classes so I could go into get my art therapy degree. And I was actually in the library and wasn't wanting to study. And there was a magazine, People magazine, with Tom Cruise on the cover. And I read the article on Tom Cruise. He's a little older than me. He's like 6 or 7 years older than I am. And he has dyslexia. And it was talking about how it was almost verbatim, wrote his letters backwards, didn't know right from left, struggled with directional things, messed up words. That's a big one. Like I would say things like, I would look at horses. Like as an adult, we went up to see my family in Wyoming, and I'm standing and my brother has mules, and I was flustered, pecking order of family and all that, and I was flustered, and I kept calling his mules horses, and I could just see the look on my family's face. They're like, oh yeah, there she is. Yep, she doesn't even know a horse from a mule, And I know that's, and like in my head, my brain starts to come out, and then somewhere around here, it flips to to horse. And and I would do things like English muffins. Country, a name of a country, and a type of bread. And English muffins would come out of my mouth in the funniest way. Like the big one was, I would call it Mexican buns. Like I know they're English muffins. I know where they come from. It's like a misfiring that happens in your head. So it would just come out, and English would turn into Mexican, and muffins would turn into buns. And I still do it. I still do it. Like the funny one is all the threads, classic color works, color and cotton. Are you kidding me? How many C words can you get? Classic color works, color and cotton. I'm never. Yeah, that just makes me, numbers. And, but like, if if someone starts to tell me a number, I just wait until they're done. They'll be trying to tell me an amount, like if we're somehow exchanging, money or, a phone number or an address, and it's not anyone who's like intimate with me and my family, I'll just wait till they're done. I won't even try. And then I'll say, okay, can you write that down for me? Because I'm not even going to try to remember it. Because I can't. I just can't remember. I can't remember numbers. Mix up words. Still don't know right from left. When you're stressed, it gets worse. Sometimes I can't even talk. I can't get things out, what I'm trying to say, if I'm like really stressed. Um, Pump machines, ATMs, Visa card readers. Those are the kinds of things that I still kind of trip over. Um, Mixing up words, is a big one. And again, that need to go back and set the record straight. Do us a favor. If it really doesn't matter, don't stop us in our tracks and correct us, please. I mean, if you don't understand, if it's confusing and you're like, I really don't get what you're saying, like I need to clarify what you mean, that's fine. But if it's like, oh, well, you said that word wrong and I need to help you and say it right. If you know what I meant, do us a favor. Don't make us go back and say it again. But yeah, so October is Dyslexic Awareness Month, and it's near and dear to my heart for art, because any of the arts in art, visual art, music, theater, are hugely needed. They're not a filler activity, contrary to a lot of the administrators that I've worked underneath. They're not a filler activity. They are critical. They're not just critical for kids that are neurodivergent, they're critical for all kids. They offer this reprieve in a day that could be overwhelming for various reasons. They teach skill sets that are used in other areas of life. But arts funding has to happen. It just has to. And I get so sad when I hear about schools that either don't have art funding anymore, or they think, oh, the classroom teacher can handle it. The classroom teacher needs a reprieve too, along with the kids. And sadly, usually art funding is connected to who's in the White House. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, it does. I mean, I'm not judge. I'm just saying, usually grants happen for arts funding when a Democrat is in the White House. That can't be surprising. But, when I was a teacher down at this one-room schoolhouse, sometimes I had more money than I could do with anything in a year, because we had some kind of a grant that came in. Other years, I was having to get clever and beg off styrofoam trays from the butcher at the grocery store to use in printmaking, or forage for cardboard pieces. That's just how it goes. Theater is the same way. Theater is a phenomenal program, because a lot of times you will get kids, like when we did theater, we had football players, druggies, goofy kids, the fringe kids, and the cheerleaders, all together working on these musicals together. Arts is just, art in general is needed in a society. I mean, in so many ways, it is just needed in a society, and it really indicates the health of the society. Yes, I think sometimes it's abused, and I can talk about that. Like I saw a public art sculpture somewhere that was so divisive, and we were on a walk, and I just was like, really? So you have the ability to put art somewhere in a public place, and that's the art you chose. So you can be divisive. And so someone who's not really big on art is going to be like, well, I'm not going to support that. That's just stupid. But that's a whole nother story, making it divisive. But yeah, I mean, but art, I have worked with kids with dyslexia, kids with autism, on the broad spectrum of autism, from kind of having it to being awkward and geeky, to extreme nonverbal kids, other cognitive issues with children. And art is this universal language that everybody understands. I have worked with Native American kids that barely will talk to a white person. They won't look at you. They won't hold eye contact. They will barely say 2 words. And then you get into art with them and they open up and they're laughing and you're like, you know, I have worked with like barely English speaking kiddos from Mexico. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You get a bucket of markers and paper, and something magical happens. Illustrator, what was her name? Blackwell, um, was a UNICEF ambassador, and she went into this village like in Kenya with like bulletin board paper and a bucket of markers, and her and all these village children, within minutes, were just interacting and drawing pictures and communicating with each other. Art is just an amazing thing. I mean, it's an entity. I mean, it's a gift from God. And it doesn't matter if it's a bucket of markers and paper or it's stitching with women, you know, and I'm talking about, you know, all the arts, whether they're the recognized ones or needlepoint, cross stitch, knitting, crocheting. You know, it's an amazing thing. So yeah. So October Dyslexic Awareness Month and the utter importance of art in that. And you know, I think I'm gonna have to do some major editing because I'm at an hour and 40 minutes on this. So hopefully I can cut some of the stuff out because that's way too long. Okay. So patterns. So I now have finished. It is, I don't know what, it's like mid-afternoon Saturday. My hope is that I will get this edited up. The last one took 9 hours to upload. I don't know if there's something going on with my internet. Before tomorrow, because tomorrow's Sunday. And then get on all the little video clips I have done in process finishing little video clips. So, just a quick review. I now have 3, 4-ish patterns that are done. 2 of them I need to get up onto my Etsy store. My Etsy store is MF Studio Stitch, and you can also link it off of my website, which is moonflowerstudio.biz. But so just a review, my first pattern I released first day of fall, which is what, 2 weeks ago, is Fox in the Box. And that is stitched on DMC, with DMC, on Aida fabric, and all of the seasonal Fox in the Boxes I'm going to release with DMC on Aida. And it is sized to fit into a 2-pound vintage wooden cheese box that you can get on Etsy, or you can get looking through your antique malls. They still have them. There's also a 5-pound, and I do have some designs that will be going into the 5-pound too. But this one is designed to be able to take out, you know, and trade out seasonally. So that is my Fox in the Box, my fall Fox in the Box. So I showed you him. And then I have my black cat in a pumpkin patch. This one is, I'm starting to use the beautiful, glorious, hand-dyed, over-dyed fabric. This is Aida. All my work, I stitch on Aida. They certainly can also be stitched on linen, but I use Aida. And that's my a black cat in a pumpkin patch. And each one of these oranges is an overdye. Like this one is Gentle Arts Tomato. And this one is, I want to say, Classic Colorworks Marmalade. And then this one I think is Classic Colorworks Autumn Spice, if I'm getting it correct. And then the black is a Roxy Floss Co. Is it onyx or charcoal? I think it's charcoal. And I have some how-to videos. My work, I do much fractional stitching. So that border is fractional stitching. And I have done some how-to videos on fractional stitching I need to get up. And then the wheat and the vines is a cheat, what I call a cheat back stitch, that I also have put some videos on. I finished it in a pillow. I like to use wool and walnut shells or lizard litter. So I really like to highlight gorgeous fabric, and I don't want to cut into the beautiful fabric, and so I do what's called a ladder stitch or invisible stitch. And I have a video that I need to get up showing how I do that. But that is my black cat in a pumpkin patch. And then in that pattern, that PDF right now I have up on my Etsy store, this cat is sized that you can do one pumpkin in the cat that will fit in a 2.5 inch across biscuit cutter. And so that's another pattern that I have up on my Etsy store right now. It seems like fractional stitches are not being readily used right now. And to me, it's like equivalent to a knitting. If you only use the knit stitch, yeah, you can make some stuff. But if you then also incorporate a purl stitch, you can even make more stuff. And then if you throw in understanding how to do a knit together or a, add one or whatever the term is, slip over, there's like maybe 4 or 5 knit stitches that if you know how to do those, or I always have to kind of look at a chart and remember how to do them, but man, your world opens up in knitting. And I think cross stitch is the same, that yes, you can do a lot with just a complete X, cross stitch, a full stitch. But if you also learn how to do a 3/4 or a half stitch, again, the world opens up. So, and then I think in one of my videos, I kind of gone on about explaining how fractional stitches allow you to have a smoother edge, a more straight edge, a diagonal edge, versus the pixelatedness you get. And that's one reason why people go so high in their counts, is to kind of limit that pixelated kind of jaggedy edge you get if you only use full stitches. I wanted to make some patterns to give information for the people who are interested in trying out fractional stitches. So I am creating what I'm calling fractional freebies, and it's a pattern that I designed. So I'm showing you because I designed it. It's my pattern that I'm going to do seasonally, and I'm going to do a video along with it. I filmed this one that I need to get edited and up, and see here I talked about the different ways you do fractional. That's why that's there. But you can see my curves. There's a lot of fractional stitches in there. But it allows you to do a lot of stuff. So here is it stitched up. And it's a pumpkin. And I stuff with wool roving, and then I do these videos right afterwards, and then I see that this thing has a bunch of fuzz on it. But there's my little pumpkin pillow, and I did a border on here that's not on this one, but the one I upload, I'm going to upload this pattern onto my website. It won't be on my Etsy shop, it'll be on my website, moonflowerstudio.biz. As a blog post, probably. I need to kind of figure out how I want to do that, but it'll include the lace pattern. And this one has some mistakes in it, like mainly that's the back side of the orange I was using. I stayed up till 1 o'clock yesterday finishing this because I wanted to get the stitching done. Got up this morning, and then I stitched it close. I don't have a sewing machine. This is all hand done. It doesn't take as long as you think it does. But yeah, so I, stitched around and turned it inside out, and then I realized that I hadn't put my wrong sides together. But I actually use the back side of fabric a lot. it's not the first time or the last time I've used the backside of fabric. So yeah, so there's my little pumpkin pillow that goes along with all the other pumpkins that I did for my black cat in a pumpkin patch. But this is a little jack-o'-lantern. So he's a fractional freebie. So this will be up on my website before the weekend's over, hopefully. And I just used a whole bunch of scrappies on this one. This is Haunted, I think. And then this is that tomato from Gentle Arts again. The marmalade. Where on here I used, I think it was Bean Sprout from Classic Colorworks. This is just a DMC that I just like the color of the DMC. So yeah, you just need to grab a dark gray, 2 oranges, and then 2 greens, you know, from your stash. So I think he turned out kind of cute, even if he was totally, and I totally messed up the my counting on the border. But you know what? That's okay. And I've done better for lacing. But okay, so these are kind of my pumpkin fall inspired patterns. These two come together, and then this is a freebie. All right, and then I had my fox in the box that I showed you. Now, I have one more grouping of holiday seasonal, but it's jumping now towards Thanksgiving and Christmas. So those hopefully will be out. Most of those are done. I just need to finish a few. The finishing, I need to finish as I go along. That's my problem. But I wanted to, the other thing I showed you, I do stuff in the biscuit cutters and in the, where did my fox in the box go? I kind of got the idea of finishing in vintage containers with my applique. So my fox in the box, like I said, I use the wood and cheese boxes. I use cookie cutters. And then I also, I think I showed you initially that I finish things in cookie cutters. And I think I showed you one of my rabbits that will be coming out in the spring. But I also, horses are very easy to find. I'm only trying to design in things that are very, like I don't walk into malls without seeing them. So I have designed a horse pattern. And here's a bunch of fuzz on him, but I'm just going to go with it, and I'll clean him up before I take a photo. But yeah, so this is my, this is a paint horse. And again, I finish, on felt. And then I stitch on Velcro on him. And then I use the sticky Velcro, which I just lost a Velcro. Where did it go? I'll find it later. Because you kind of do need to get them to get down easier with a little Velcro. Finish it with vintage Mardi Gras beads. I talked about the balancing you kind of need to do, and I will have some videos about finishing in the cookie cutter. How I do it, how to cut the shape for your cookie cutter, because there's a lot of slight variations in the cookie cutters, either from different manufacturers or from use. But these are designed that you have a little adjustment you can do when you're making them. So I have him as a paint in the cookie cutter, and this is on 18 count. To fit in the cookie cutter, I use 18 count. And I want to say I did use some cypress, but you can barely tell. It's just in a couple places. And then I also did an Appaloosa. And this is on 16 count. And I think this is cornflower. And this is dark chocolate. And this is bean sprout. And I want to say this is just 310, black 310. But so you can see the size difference is not huge. You get between the 18 and the 16 count. So you could, I have finished in the cookie cutter a 16 count that was shrunk. I have, like, I usually check the gauge, and I have finished a cookie cutter that was actually in theory like a 17 count, because you're only, I think they're like 3 or 4 inches across. You're not really gaining a lot. You can do it. You might have to adjust slightly. But yeah, but so then this is my and these are just primitive horses. They're kind of inspired by folk art, children's like block art, like you'll see blocks, like play blocks with just like a single animal, a side view of a single animal. So that is, and also these used to be called vanity illustrations that traveling artists would go around and they would paint a farmer's prize horse or sheep. You would see side profile pictures of livestock for the fair, the county fairs or the state fairs. And that's these primitive animals. And I have multiple different primitive animals. I'm working on another one that's more holiday-ish. I'm working on a couple actually that have a little holiday lean to them. So yeah, so these are my primitive horse. I mean, again, if you do it on 18 count, they're sized for a cookie cutter. This is Classic Color Works Autumn Spice. And then this is Classic Color Works, I think it's Classic Color Works Toasted Marshmallow. And honestly, I could have used white. Like, it has no variation in it whatsoever. Gentle Arts Roasted Marshmallow is a gorgeous one if you want a little bit more variation. And then this is Almost Auburn Classic Color Works, I want to say. So yeah, so those are my horses. This one I did another, and these have a lot of fractional stitches in them. I did another border, and this is Roxy Flosco Creamsicle is the border. And I did this one on another reason why I don't like cutting this fabric and then putting something, you know, to then not have to deal with the invisible stitch. But I mean, invisible stitches are not hard to learn. And they're invisible. Anybody can do this. This is not hard. You just have to practice. But this is the one reason why I don't like to do that is this is actually sari fabric from India. And I get it when we travel in New Mexico, Taos, which is about an hour away from Santa Fe, but it's up in the mountains. And it was on the major supply train from St. Louis into New Mexico was Taos. And interesting history, interesting little plaza like Santa Fe on a smaller scale. But near the plaza is a shop called something Hands. I'll have to put it on the screen because I can't remember. But like right on the corner is a good restaurant, a good bookstore, and this little fabric store specializes in world fabrics. And they have fabric from India, which is the sari fabric. And I cut off that strip. You know, like you think about sari fabric and it has like that embroidered strip on the edge, and I'll save that for something else. But yeah, but I got this a couple years ago and I was trying to think of what I wanted to put, and I thought, oh my gosh, that sari fabric would just be gorgeous. So yeah, so that's why I want to highlight gorgeous fabric, you know, like this is so fun. I don't want to put something on there. So yeah, so those are my prim horses, my primitive horses. And I will hopefully get that pattern up on my Etsy shop, MF Studio Stitch. No, did I say that right? MF Studio Stitch. I think that's it. That'll be on the link. Dyslexic. But you can link it through my website, which is moonflowerstudio.biz. So I'll have this up. This will be a freebie and video linked to a YouTube video on how to do fractional stitches. So that I need to get that up. This is up on, again, my Etsy store. And this is up. And then I have another primitive animal that will be just like this, where the option will be a pillow or however you want to finish it, but it'll be sized to a cookie cutter for next week. And then I have my big variation pattern, multiple variation pattern for Christmas. And if that gets up, I don't think I can get it up next week. I think I should focus on getting all these pieces and parts finished and up and kind of clear the slate and then do the Christmas, I think. I say things like this on this video and then I do something entirely different. So I think that's it. That's enough. I'll need to spend the rest of the day editing all these chunks and pieces and getting these up to YouTube. And hopefully my internet is working faster than it did last time. And I will see you next week. Through this week, I'm trying to do more on my Instagram and my art Facebook page are both Moonflower Muse. Moonflower and then M-U-S-E, Muse. And my website is moonflowerstudio.biz, B-I-Z, instead of .com. And the Moonflower Muse is also for Pinterest. And at some point, I want to clean up my Pinterest board and get that more interesting than it has been for the last couple of years. So I think that's it. Again, happy birthday to all of the other stitchers, floss tubers, shop owners that seem to have a birthday in October. It's pretty cool to be connected to them. And I will also, now that I'm kind of making a video underneath my belt, I will try and link more to these other floss tubers that I really have been enjoying watching. So thank you, and we will see you next week.